This is the Amazing Teacher Podcast with Sam Rangel, episode number 25.
Welcome to the Amazing Teacher Podcast, where we sit down with amazing educators and pick their brains for tips, strategies, and ideas that you can take into your classrooms and be amazing. Now, here's your host, Sam Rangel.
Welcome, amazing teachers, to the 25th episode of the Amazing Teacher Podcast. This is Sam from successintheclassroom.com, and I want to thank you for listening in to another one of my conversations with an amazing educator. Today, my guest is Ben Kuhlman from Writing Teaching and Teaching Writing. I found Ben on Twitter, and when I was reading his blog, I found a great post on the power of Twitter. You know, Ben is like a Twitter expert. You know, I'm still learning all that Twitter offers, and so I thought having Ben on the podcast would be helpful not only to me, but also to my listeners, especially new teachers. If you're a new teacher and you're looking to become that amazing teacher your kids deserve, and I believe you are, because otherwise you wouldn't be listening to this podcast, I believe you have to make time to learn from other successful teachers, and Twitter gives you that opportunity. Ben shares on the podcast how easy it is to collaborate and connect with amazing teachers via Twitter, and how to ask questions of these successful teachers about anything. You know, if you're having an issue with classroom management, if you're having problems with, lesson planning, you can find a teacher on Twitter who's having success in these areas, and you can ask them questions. And, you know, they're not like movie stars or superstars who don't answer back. These are teachers who are willing to help. I mean, that's what teachers do. They teach. And so when someone asks them a question about something that they're experts in, they want to help. So Twitter is such a great tool to do that. So cool, so cool. Well, Ben also shares his insights on the qualities of amazing teachers and on classroom management. I especially like his view on the quiet classroom versus the interesting classroom. Listen for that, listen for that. All right, so let's get right into the podcast with amazing teacher and Twitter expert, Ben Kuhlman. Ready? Here we go. Today, I'm so happy to have Ben Kuhlman from Teaching Writing and Writing Teaching on the podcast. Welcome to the show, Ben.
Hello.
Well, again, thank you again, Ben, for letting me pick your brain and for taking the time out to sit with me and talk about teaching. I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us here on the podcast.
Great to be here.
Thanks. Well, before we begin, Ben, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your teaching career, how you got into teaching, and why you became a teacher? And then maybe tell us what your blog is all about.
Okay. I started teaching as a retail employee at a Franklin Covey store in Beechwood, Ohio in 1999. I was teaching people how to use their Palm Pilots. Mm-hmm. And I really enjoyed the opportunity to help people do something that I thought was kind of useful, sort of. After a while, I started to want to do something more meaningful. I went back to grad school and got an English master's and did some teaching college writing while I was at John Carroll. I went to UWM and taught some more writing there. And then I ended up in a teacher recruiting program as a science teacher in Chicago Public Schools, and I taught in Chicago Public Schools for a year as a fifth grade teacher on the west side of Chicago. And then I moved out to the suburbs, out to here in Wheeling, where I teach seventh grade reading, science, and social studies at a public middle school in Wheeling. I got into teaching. Kind of hinted at it there in the beginning. I felt like through various jobs that I held down over the years that I wanted to do something kind of useful. I wanted it to be important. I felt like there were jobs I could pursue where I might make a lot of money, but I didn't really see that as important as trying to help people be better at things that are important to them. So I really liked teaching English or teaching writing at the college level. I really liked teaching a lot of the different parts of fifth grade. And I've always enjoyed the chance to help kids feel better about themselves, feel like school is helpful and meaningful and useful. I really try to focus on the pragmatic approach and what, pragmatically speaking, is useful about what I'm instructing. What do they get? What are they going to get out of this that they can use?
Right.
And
Right.
I really try to focus on the ends and the value.
And your blog. Tell me about your blog.
Okay. The blog started quite a long time ago as something to do while I was in graduate school, to try to write more, to share some of my research about, at the time, William Faulkner, who was my focus in grad school. From there, it kind of transformed into anything I felt like writing about. I wrote a lot about some of his work, some of Faulkner's work, some of my teaching in the college level. And then it became more about the writing instruction. I started to discover that as I grew and developed as a teacher, my biggest strength and my biggest value to my readers as a blogger was really the focus on writing and the various elements that come out of that. I talk a lot about technology now because I feel like writing and technology are becoming closely related. But for me, the writing is still my shtick, my bailiwick, as my dad would say.
Well, I was reading your blog, and I was really impressed with your expertise on Twitter. I was talking to a teacher actually she's a substitute teacher at my school who has been trying to get a position in school in the district, but there are just no openings in her area. So she was talking to me about because she's going to go back and get a supplemental just so she can be a little bit more marketable and attractive when it comes to looking for a position. And she was asking me for advice. And I told her Twitter has so much to offer. If a lot of us who have been teaching for a while, Twitter for me is still kind of new. We didn't grow up with Twitter. And I was telling her some of the newer teachers that are coming out, maybe even the more younger teachers, have that advantage over us older guys because they're on Twitter and they're able to use that as a collaborative place where they can get new information, new strategies, new ways of teaching. And so my advice was to get a Twitter account and start collaborating and start learning. And that's why I was so interested in this interview, because you on your blog, you're like a Twitter expert, and you blog a lot about Twitter and what you're doing on Twitter. In fact, my last guest, Tammy Tweeton, talks about how she learned so much in the Q conference on the power of Twitter. So I was so glad that you're going to be on the show so I can pick your brain about Twitter. So let's say you're talking to a new teacher and or even an older teacher who's looking for a fresh start maybe. What would you say are the benefits to Twitter or being part of Twitter community?
Well, I just presented about this at a conference over the weekend. It's
Awesome.
more focused on value for students, but the value to Twitter is networking. Number one, you get a chance to collaborate or interact with teachers all over the world. Some of the best and brightest teachers, I think, are on Twitter. People like Josh Stumpenhorst, who just won the Illinois State Teachers Award last year. I forget which one. There's a lot of really great teachers who are on Twitter to share ideas. Most of the teachers that I've interacted with are approachable. They respond to questions, especially if you tweet them a direct question. That's something they can respond to within a reasonable format.
Mm-hmm.
I've connected with a lot of well-known teacher professional writers, Donald Miller, Jeff Anderson, who's one of my heroes as a writer of books about teaching writing. I've been able to interact with them on Twitter in ways that I would never have been able to without it. Excuse me. I've also found opportunities for Skyping with authors via Twitter. Last year, we Skyped with author Kathleen Dewey about writing, my students and I. I've had a couple of offers. There's a lot of cool ideas that other teachers will share on Twitter that being on Twitter makes you a party of. I think that would be the number one. It's just the ideas.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot to be said for just Googling what you're looking for, but to actually have another professional teacher with experience, with respect, and with ideas about what you're teaching to say, try this, it worked for me. That's a different thing than a Google search, I think. And the other thing is that it's responsive and reactive, that there are opportunities to connect with those teachers, ask them questions or share ideas with them and get feedback, which I've done and have done for people. And then there's the chats. And I think the chats are what really got me stuck on Twitter. It's more than just a way to whittle away a few minutes in between activities. It's a chance to discuss a topic, usually a moderated discussion around an issue or an area of concern, depending on the chat or whatever. So on Tuesday afternoon at 6 o'clock, well, I guess it's late afternoon, there's a chat called Ed Chat. It's one of the biggest educational Twitter chats. And there are sometimes 500-600 teachers tweeting about what the issue is. And the last one on Tuesday was about being a connected educator. So I was on that chat and I was tweeting in response to some questions about what's the value to teachers of being on Twitter. And I would respond, and then I would get a response from another teacher from Maine, who's been on Twitter since pretty much it started. And then it turned into a conversation with this other teacher over maybe 10 or 12 separate tweets. So it's not just a one tweet. You don't have to sum up everything say in one tweet. Over 10 or 12 tweets about how to inspire other teachers to get on Twitter and see the value. So conversations, resources, connections, and I like to think some kind of networking too. I'm going to be participating in something called Ed Camp Chicago next weekend, where I'll be basically, it's a teacher-led professional development session all Saturday, pretty much all Saturday, including a whole bunch of people that I met through Twitter. That I actually had this opportunity presented to me through Twitter, that someone that I interact with frequently on some Twitter chats, Paul Solar, said, we're trying to get a group together to start Ed Camp Chicago back up. Would you be interested? And I said, heck yeah. And I love the first one, and I'm excited to be doing another one. Twitter made that opportunity happen for me, and it's helped me connect with a lot of really great teachers and have a lot of really positive, powerful learning experiences as a teacher.
Almost all of the guests I've had on the show, I've met on Twitter. They're sharing their expertise in the different chats and different tweets, and it just amazing what's out there. We think that we have to go to a conference to listen to an expert, when there's so many experts, right there on your smartphone, right there on your computer, and that you can just pick their brain and they'll answer. It's not like, you have to sign up to talk to them. It's amazing. I've spoken with so many great, amazing educators that are just willing to help. So great advice for new teachers. And again, even those teachers who are just looking for something fresh, something new to connect with kids. Great resource. Great resource. So can you tell us, Ben, what are some of the maybe rules or guidelines? Let's say a new teacher just wants to start out on Twitter. What advice would you give them as far as the maybe etiquette rules, what to look for, who to look for, anything like that you can offer?
Sure. Generally speaking, you want to follow a bunch of teachers. It's not going to hurt you to follow. You can unfollow. And I would say Twitter will suggest some people, and that's fine. I would say find a teacher that you think is a good person to follow, and then look at who they follow. Josh Stumpenhorst, I mentioned, is a big person on Twitter. You can look at a Twitter teacher that you admire and look at who they follow. That's a good way, and who follows them. You can look at someone's lists. A lot of people like me or other teachers will make lists of great people to follow. So you can look for lists. But the biggest thing is going to be making your own connections with people. And you do that by, first of all, following people, which you on Twitter, you see when people follow you.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times people will look at your profile and you might get a tweet like, hey, you're a new teacher. Awesome. Welcome. And you might get like, see that you're interested in writing, or I see whatever. So you want to make sure that your profile looks professional and looks like people might approach you. You don't have to, whatever your profile picture is, you don't have to be like, it can be whatever, but you want your profile to say something about you that people might want to engage with. Like, why are you on Twitter? I'm here to network professionally and looking for good ideas about teaching reading in middle school or something. And that's really, I think, the most useful way to use your profile. And then to stop by the chats. I think the chats are a good way to meet a lot of people really fast. And you can see pretty quickly in the chats who's sharing really powerful or useful stuff, mm-hmm. or whose ideas resonate with you. And then you can follow that person and even tweet directly to that person and say, hey, I'm trying a new curriculum this year. This text is working out great. What are some things that you use to teach this with? Can we talk? Or just trade a couple of tweets. And it can be that simple. And I think one of the reasons Twitter works is that's low. That's not a lot of commitment from the other teacher to say, tweet me a question and I'll tweet you back. And it'll take me maybe 20 seconds and I can give you a couple of ideas. Maybe I've had it grow from there into other conversations. We trade emails or whatever, but it's not a big imposition to ask them a question on Twitter. And I think that's one of the biggest things about it and why it's successful is mm-hmm. tweet me a question, I'll tweet you back, and no big deal. And maybe it helps you. If not, there's millions of other people out there who might be able to help you.
Right.
So.
Very good. Very good. Again, I've been on Twitter for maybe, I don't know, a year and a half, even probably less than that. But so much value I've received from the people that are just, again, willing to help out and share their expertise. And a great resource. So I'm going to make sure that on the show notes here, they're going to have your Twitter handle so that they can contact you if they have any questions. Thank you again for sharing that, Ben.
No problem.
Well, the purpose of the podcast, Ben, again, is to sit down with amazing teachers like yourself and pick your brain for tips, strategies, and ideas that new teachers can take into the classroom and be amazing. Now, I know that in your experience, you've run across many amazing teachers. What are some characteristics or qualities that you find common among these amazing teachers?
I think amazing teachers are good listeners. I think you have to be able to respond to the students as they are, not as what you think they were yesterday or what your expectation is based on whatever test scores or factors that you're looking at. You have to be able to respond to what they say. I mean, not just that, but to be able to read your students well. I feel like that's a really important skill for a teacher who wants to adapt and be effective for the students they actually have. Another important thing for a really great teacher is like a reasonable idea of self, like a realistic self-concept where they understand. Even the great teachers usually know that they're really good, and they're okay with saying that about themselves. While at the same time, they can say, it worked really well today, and so far I'm doing awesome. And these are the things that I do that work really well. But I'm going to keep my eyes open, and I'm going to listen, and I'm going to pay attention to what else is coming. And I'm going to be willing to try new things, and I'm going to be humble about what works, and I'm going to listen to other people, and I'm going to respect this profession as something, since it works with people, that's going to be complex and changing. And if next week someone comes to me and says, I've got this really awesome idea, and it's really cool, what do you think? I might try that. Mm-hmm. Even if I have other things that are pretty effective, I might still experiment and still be humble about what works, and knowing that every once in a while, everyone has a bad day or has a lesson that flops, and how can I recover, etc.
Yeah, those lessons that flop, they seem to happen at the worst times, when at the end of the school year or right before testing. But
Yeah.
but I like that. I like being able to recognize that and then willing to try new things. Very good. Um, well, many new teachers, Ben, and even some veteran teachers struggle with classroom management, and I think with new teachers, this is the key subject that I think they struggle with the most in the beginning, and even veteran teachers struggle. But I think new teachers, for especially, they want to get that classroom management down, especially for, they want to earn their position, if you can call it that. They want the administration to stop by the room and say, "Hey, this teacher's got it under control." And a lot of times it's not that easy. Those first few years. What advice would you give a teacher who is struggling maybe with classroom management?
Well, this is something that I think all teachers, unless they're a good natural classroom manager, kind of struggle with. And I put a lot of thought into this. And I think the reason that I can manage a classroom is because I build a lot of strong relationships with the kids. And I think it boils down to, I'm not a big scary guy, and I'm not threatening. I'm not evil. I just try to develop a relationship with kids of trust, of respect, and of that. I really think what we're doing right here is important, students. I respect you as people. We have a job that we need to do. I'll listen to your requests within reason. If you have an emergency, I'll respect that, and so on. Like the relationships that you can use to help students persist through the hard stuff that you're going to ask them to do, to put up with like the distractions and try not to get too pulled into, like yesterday we had a horrible thunderstorm going on outside, and it got really dark in the middle of the day, and it's like, guys, it's dark outside, let's turn and look, and then let's come back and continue the learning. It's just a storm, and it's really not that exciting after 10 seconds. So those kinds of things, and you can joke around with students, and to be able to say, I want my classroom to be a fun place because I'm going to like my students. I'm going to choose to like my students. I'm going to develop a relationship where maybe they'll like me. I hope they do, because I can teach better when they do. But in the end, do they at least respect me enough where they'll listen to what I have to say, or they'll try what I ask them to try, or they'll ask me when they have a question instead of being worried about me freaking out about it. I think trust and respect are really big. I think the other part is, are you asking them to do stuff that is challenging enough to be interesting, but easy enough where they can do it, worth doing? And is there some kind of novelty, or there's something a little bit interesting or unusual? All of the things about effective instruction, and remembering that effective instruction is part of classroom management, that you can make them quiet and get them to listen, but then if you have nothing to say, you've managed a classroom into boredom. So that's the other part of it. And I tend to err on the side of being interesting instead of being quiet. I try to be interesting, which sometimes means that my classes are not the quietest place in the building. And I think that's okay.
Yeah, I like that. Being interesting instead of being quiet. I think that is great. A great quote there. You mentioned a couple things that I want you to have you elaborate a little bit. Respect and relationships seem that they go together. You said building those strong relationships at the same time showing respect. I think you hit it right on the nail there. If you want those strong relationships, you have to demonstrate that you respect the kids. Would you agree to that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If a kid is worried about something, even if it seems bizarre to you, you need to try to take it seriously. You also have to remember, especially with younger kids, that you're the adult and that you have to kind of temper those fears. But if a student is extremely worried about something on their shoe, you can't just say, no, you're crazy. Stop it. Sit down.
Get over it.
Or if you do, you have to expect that that's going to hurt your relationship with the kid, and that you need to try to rebuild that relationship at some point, or that kid is not going to like you. Or not just, I don't want it to just be about popularity, but that kid is going to say, okay, well, this person is not respecting what matters to me.
Mm-hmm.
And when I have a concern, this person is not taking it seriously. So I don't like that person as much, and I'm not going to take their concerns as seriously anymore. So this is the hard part, I think. You have to balance that, okay, you're freaking out about your shoe, and the, okay, this person is really worried about something that really matters to them, and it might be unpleasant for you to completely dismiss that person's concerns. So if the person's really freaked out about the shoe, I might say, okay, well, it doesn't look like a big deal to me. Why is that such a big deal to you? And just ask them to explain if I don't get it. Or, well, I'm really sorry that your shoe is dirty. What can we do to help? Do you want to go to the bathroom and get a paper towel to wipe it off? And try to, maybe it's a simple solution. But little things like that. I mean, keep in mind that sometimes kids will make up reasons to get out of class when they're bored.
Yeah.
Or want to take a test or whatever. Or they want to see their boyfriend. So trying to find the reasonable balance of those kinds of things.
Right. Very good. Very good. And then you mentioned you're going to choose to like your students. I think that's so key, because there are some students that liking them just doesn't come naturally. But I think amazing teachers make a decision. I'm going to like this kid, even if the kid doesn't like me, or no one else likes this kid. It's easy to love the lovable, but I think amazing teachers choose to love the unlovable. And I think that's a great point there.
Yeah.
Very good, very good. Thank you for that, Ben. Well, Ben, do you have a favorite quote that has inspired you, maybe as a teacher, that you would want to share here with us?
I think I still like the if you look for the bad in people, you will find it. I still like that as a quote, and we did just talk about that, but I think it's really important to remember that a lot of your relationships with people are affected by your perceptions of that people, and whether you show it or not, or whether you don't think you show it or not, if you try to like a person, it will make you a more pleasant person when you're talking to that person. It'll be easier to relate to them professionally if you try to like them.
Right. Very true. And imagine how frustrating it can get if you're always looking for the negative, always looking for the bad, because you're going to find it, and it's frustrating because you want to change it, you want to fix it, but you can't. And I know people who focus on the negative, and they're just frustrated all the time.
Yeah.
Very, very true. Very true. If you could sit down with a new teacher, Ben, just starting out in their career, and you had time for just one piece of advice, what would that advice be?
That's hard. I'm trying to pick from a big list in my brain.
Get on Twitter.
Yeah. I think for me, the best decision was to go watch other teachers as much as I could, to go sit in someone else's classroom and see what they do. That does two things. Number one, it helps you see how that person does it. Hopefully you pick someone who's successful, because I think that's a little more useful, especially in the beginning. Mm-hmm. How they can do it. Hopefully they're not so awesome that you get intimidated, but how it works for them, and how the little decisions that they're doing that help keep their classroom functioning. But it also, I had the pleasant experience of observing some fantastic teachers and saying, this person is an awesome teacher, but there are some things that they do that I can do too. There are some of the ways that they deal with students that I know I can do. And here's a way it humanizes the good teaching. It makes it more real, more approachable, more achievable when you see someone doing it, and you can say, that's something I could do. Right. And say, okay, well, now I got to go do it. So I think that was a big thing for me as a new teacher, is observing others.
That's great. A lot of times we're told what to do, or we read what to do, but seeing it in action, in any circumstance, and you see it live, you see it in action, you learn more.
Absolutely.
Very true. Very true. So what's happening now, Ben, that in your life or in your professional life that you're excited about?
Well, I mentioned Ed Camp Chicago already. That's coming up next weekend. Very excited about a chance to go to another one of those. I have a different set of things I want to talk about at Camp Chicago, and that's one of the things I like about it is I'm sure everyone else does, and I'm sure that somebody's going to want to talk about like social media and teaching writing, all those things. So I'm excited about all of that coming up. I am starting a big writing workshop chunk of class time in my classroom. I'm really excited about a chance to do a whole bunch of writing workshop in my classroom. It's my favorite thing to teach. My favorite way to interact with students is in that writing conference because it's a really powerful connection you can make with a kid to sit there and talk about their writing, which hopefully matters to them, and to point out, again, finding the good. And when you can find the good in their writing, then it becomes an academic, positive relationship that can really turn a kid around. And it's really awesome. And also, it's spring. We have the trees are starting to look like trees again and not just dead sticks. Here in the Chicago area, we had some late snow, and spring is a little slow in coming back or bringing life back to the world. And I've got a couple of weddings going on from old college buddies, so got a lot of like planning stuff and social stuff going on, and some travel, all that stuff.
Very cool, very cool. Ed Camp. Again, I hear a lot about Ed Camp and the benefits of just collaborating with other teachers and hearing hearing teachers talk about their experiences. Instead of going to a conference and listening to an expert, you sit around with a bunch of experts and just share ideas. Great concept. And again, I mentioned in another podcast, I'm looking for an Ed Camp nearby where I live just to experience it. Because again, like you say, a lot of great stuff happening there. Well, is there anything else you'd like to share with us before we say goodbye, Ben?
Well, I can plug our chat. We, myself and another teacher, started another Twitter chat about the teaching of writing. It's called Teach Writing, hashtag TEACHWRITING. It's on every other Tuesday. We have one coming up on Tuesday that I think will be guest moderated by another teacher, but I'm working out some details. We're trying to grow a community of writing instructors who want to share ideas and collaborate about the teaching of writing at pretty much any level. So I'd love to see. That's
Teach Writing, just the way it's spelled, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Try to make it easy. And coming up on summer, I'm very excited about summer. I'm going to try to read. Last summer I read 50 kid books. I'm going to try to read another 50.
Wow.
Lots of chance to learn and sharpen the saw, as Stephen Covey would say.
Mm-hmm.
And keep in mind that's an important part of teaching is rest, relaxation, and get ready for more.
Right. Well, Ben, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you so much for spending time with us and sharing your insights on all this, especially Twitter and writing. I really appreciate you hanging out with us today.
Thank you. It was an honor. Thank you very much.
So to the listeners, I know you received a lot of great information in this episode. Now it's up to you to take it back to your classroom and implement what you learned today. So until next time,
be amazing.
The Amazing Teacher Podcast is brought to you by SuccessInTheClassroom.com. Learn more about being an amazing teacher by visiting SuccessInTheClassroom.com or TheAmazingTeacher.com.